Justin Trugman is a serial entrepreneur and current co-founder and head of technology at Better Future Labs, a venture studio focused on developing multi-agent systems. Before co-founding Better Future Labs, he was VP of software development at telehealth startup Caregility, co-founded video delivery network startup BlinkCDN, turning into the nonprofit Secure Meeting, and worked at Google X's Project Loon.
Justin's pursuit of his ever-present startup bug is not only inspirational, but also gives us some valuable insight into what we should be doing in our college years and beyond.
Hello, my name is Zidanni.
And I'm Emilio.
And Your World.
We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Emilio. Just wanted to give you guys a quick disclaimer for the episode. Around 10 to 15 minutes got cut off in editing due to a card corruption error. So for about a quarter of the episode, it'll just be our thumbnail with the audio from our recording in the background. So yeah, just want to let you guys know, and thank you so much, and enjoy the episode.
All right, if you look in front of you, there is a cup. So we're trying to do this new thing. For each guest, we get them like a themed drink.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you know your like coffee terminology, but I guess based on the size, what would you guess this would be called?
An espresso?
All right,
Close. Yeah.
All right.
It's a baby chino. Baby chino. So it's
yeah, it says it right there.
Yeah, it's a smaller coffee, it's a smaller cappuccino, but without the coffee.
Interesting.
So it's for children. So it's basically steamed milk. And I guess we chose it to it symbolizes Better Future Labs, how it's a venture studio and how they nurture startups.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, there's just a nice connection that we make. So yeah, please try it and tell us how it is.
Very cool. Well,
All right.
cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's steamed milk.
Yeah, it's steamed. It's steamed milk.
It's steamed milk.
It really it's dependent on if you're a milk fan or not, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
like milk.
in a way, yeah.
That's funny. Thanks.
But yeah. So you're our first to try the drink. So yeah, we appreciate you playing along. So give us your rating real quick.
I think it's good. Yeah, it's milk. I
It's
have
milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Milk every morning when I, after I go to the gym, have it with my protein shakes.
Oh, there you
It's
go.
good to get some more milk in later in the day.
So when we first had the idea of having you on the show, Zidanni told me this really cool story about you. I don't know about the secure meeting.
Yeah, it's how you landed the internship.
Yeah.
If you
I
could
would love for you to tell that story, especially because a lot of our viewers are going to be doing technical interviews, things like that. Wanting to get internships. So I think your story is so great because it's gonna encourage a lot of people to just go out and build things. So yeah, if you'd be willing to tell.
Yeah, let's do it. So I guess diving into that. So I was always someone who learned better by building than by sitting in a classroom. I did not learn well sitting in a classroom, but building things I learned so much faster and so much better. So the way I would learn was from building startups, right? Like what I was doing with Professor McCoon, with BlinkCDN, with Secure Meeting, and building those projects taught me, I think, a lot more than just a traditional computer science, computer engineering, software engineering education ever would. So when it came time for my second technical interview with Google X, we were diving in. It was standard coding interview. Typing out code in Google Docs, pseudocode, and we were on a Google Meet. So the way it was working is Google Meet, it was essentially face-to-face. We could see each other typing in a Google Doc that was screen shared. Going, the Google Meet starts having issues. The video was getting blurry and fuzzy, mostly iframe and pframe errors, if you guys know what that is. And the audio was getting choppy, and I was like, you know what? I built my own secure meeting.
Yeah.
Let's switch to this. And then the interviewer, who would then become my intern mentor, he was like, first a little bit what do you mean?
Yeah.
So I had to explain that a little bit. And then I sent him a link. And I was like, here, let's try this. And we then transitioned over to a secure meeting. And it was working great.
Yeah.
And then
the
technical interview ended up pivoting to more about how did you, the questions were how did you build Secure Meeting? What are you doing for your adaptive bitrate algorithm? How are you, so we dove into how Secure Meeting was working. And it was super interesting. What was supposed to be like a 45-minute technical interview ended up being like, I think it was like an hour and a half or like 2 hours of us just talking about like secure meeting. And, you know, it was a really, like, it turned a, you know, high stress situation where, like, you could imagine, like, you know, you're getting a tough programming question that you're doing well on responding, but, you know, the internet's cutting out, you can't hear what the interviewer is saying, to like very seamless conversation. And
I know.
So that's kind of the story, I guess, and they came through with an offer.
I'm so happy to hear you tell that. Like, to me, that's such a cool story. I mean, like, I mean, maybe you could have, you know, gotten the position regardless, but like, that's just like so impressive and really, really, really cool.
Yeah, and there's this huge like sentiment, like especially like in our college year, that, you know, it's so hard to get an internship. Everybody's pushing, you know, the CS job market is basically dead. And you know, it just brings me back to this quote. I can't like say it verbatim, but to paraphrase, is Gary Tan. He said something along the lines of, you know, if you prove that you can build, then the whole world just opens up for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, you know, hiring engineers is something that I've done, you know, later on in my career when I was, you know, VP at Caregility, Telehealth startup, and now as a co-founder of startup. And to be honest, I really don't look at a person's transcript. I look at what have they actually done, because I've had I won't say who, but I've had an intern in the past that was on my team from a very good computer science school, Berkeley, and he was like top of his class. I was super excited about getting an intern from Berkeley. I was like, this is great. This person's going to be amazing. And we had to teach him Git.
Oh my!
And and I was like, all right, this person's, you know, like a junior going into senior year from an amazing, you know, like an amazing school, right? And he was like, I think he had like a 3.7 or something, like really good, much better than I ever had in school. And he didn't know how to use Git, which is like fundamental. So for me, like, ever since that experience, it's been really eye-opening for me, where when I'm hiring, I care about, like, what have you shipped? You know, like, enough of your grades, sure, whatever. What products have you shipped? What do they do? How do they work? Show me some of the hardest technical problems that you've solved and work me through your thought process and how you solve them. That's what I really care about, because you could be amazing at answering leak code algorithms questions, but if you can't use Git, then you can't work on my team. You know?
I found it interesting that you didn't say built, you said shipped, like actually put into, like, deployed and put in production.
Yeah.
I get what is your advice to people that, you know, that just like to keep their projects in localhost?
Yeah, I would say definitely it's actually I think it's more of a mental state to not ship something than a technical barrier state to not ship something. I think a lot of people are scared to be like, okay, well, when there's actual people using this, then I have to support it, and there might be bugs and there might be issues, especially more junior people. So I think actually taking something from an idea and actually having, even if it's one person, right? Or even if it's nobody, but it's out there live, where you could send me a link, or I could, you know, you send me the open source GitHub repository and I could run it locally, you know, like having something shipped, and it could literally be as simple as that, as, you know, open sourcing it and being like, hey, run this tool locally. I think it just shows, like, okay, you could take something, you know, take an idea and actually deliver it.
And you have the courage to put yourself out there too.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and it's, you know, it's very impressive, I think, if there's, you know, a very junior person that has actually like built a project and someone's using it in some form, whether it's open source on GitHub and it's got like, even if it's like 50 stars on GitHub or something like that, like that's very impressive for like a sophomore, junior in college to have, you know?
Yeah, 50 stars. Like I'm thinking like 5 stars good right now, to be honest. But that's, I guess, one more thing on the topic of, you know, hiring and stuff, because, you know, that's sort of like a little theme we're getting right here. Like, so yeah, building is definitely number one. I think a lot of people are actually like coming around to that and realizing that, you know, it's not just grades. But what are some other, I guess, like maybe underrated things, like if you could say that you look for, or you think, oh, that's interesting, like let me look into this person a little bit more?
Yeah, like I really like seeing people's thought process behind things. So, like, there's a couple questions I like asking. The first is, what is essentially what are some of the hardest technical challenges that you've solved, and walk me through how you solve them. So that really showcases, what type of problems are they solving, what's their approach to solving it, because when you're working in an engineering team, you have to be able to solve problems collaboratively as well and on your own. So it's good to see how their problem solving methodology is. It's also an interesting thing that you could see from that is, did they actually solve the problem? So, like, one thing that is easy to pick out is, was someone just like a manager where someone on their team solved the problem, or did they actually hands-on solve the problem? And that's something that's important depending on what level you're hiring for. So it's always interesting to see what people respond to that, and it always, at least my experience, it always opens up doors to ask really interesting follow-up questions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, once you get people to talk about themselves and, like, more projects they've done, I could absolutely see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear from, like, an employer, because I think our past, like, few episodes have, been, like, researchers, other students and stuff. But, yeah, I think this is, like, really valuable information you're giving, so thank you for that.
No problem.
So now you're in now you're doing Better Future Labs.
Yeah.
Your office. You walked over here today.
Yeah.
So very close to here. So our question to you is, why did you choose to found Better Future Labs and enter the venture studio space?
Yeah, so there's a bit of history there. I was looking to start a AI software testing company. So one of the things that I personally as a developer hate is writing unit and integration tests.
Oh, yeah.
They're not fun, right? Like, I know there's like a whole train of test-driven development, and there's a lot of really good practices around unit tests that I enforced with my teams and still do. For not like, I think test coverage percentage is a dumb number. I think more about like, well, what are the key functions of the application and that type of testing strategy. But general developers typically do not like writing tests.
That's true.
So I was like, all right, how can we apply AI to write the tests for us? And I built one of the first unit testing VS Code extensions, and also GitHub Action automations for it, for automated unit test. And it supported JavaScript, Python. It actually still has, I think, over 1,000 downloads. I just have it up. So I was going to launch this company, and I pitched at what would become my co-founder, Aaron. He runs an event called Propellify at Hoboken at the Pier. Big startup event. There's a lot of people from New Jersey, New York City that attend.
Oh, that's cool.
And I pitched softwaretesting.ai at that event. And he was like, this is great, interesting. We're starting this venture studio thing. I didn't know much about it. He's like, let's grab lunch, sometime soon. So we grabbed lunch the week after, and he was explaining to me, like, what they were looking to do, how software testing AI might be able to fit into what they were going to do. And what was really interesting is it seemed like it was a great opportunity for not just software testing AI to be built out, but also to be a part of something bigger, where a venture studio is essentially like a factory of companies, and software testing AI could be one of those companies that would be launched out. So it was really interesting, and he was, this was very, very early days, and he was looking for a technical co-founder to join on. And I was really excited about the idea, really excited about the mission of like an AI-centric venture studio that's building innovative companies, solving like business problems, leveraging this cutting-edge technology, and I kind of got hooked and haven't looked back since.
Yeah. So you actually have like, just to clarify, you actually have your unit testing thing, as a part of this like AI.
So it was we originally were going to bring it into the studio, and like 3 or 4 weeks later, GitHub launched GitHub Copilot X. And that pretty much crushed softwaretesting.ai. So I still have actually the domain softwaretesting.ai. I still own that domain. And I still have the product live, by the way. It's free to use.
Cool.
I just kind of released it kind of free, open source. People could use it, and it's a It's a really cool project that I built, and I actually still kind of use it a bunch. It's still useful for me. But yeah, nothing ever came of it commercially. But Better Future Labs, of course, really has been taking off and doing well.
So how involved are you with the startups in Better Future Labs?
Yeah, so we're still very early days. So we're just on the verge of launching our first set of companies, our first cohort. And the way it works is, Venture Studio, you have a bunch of ideas that are sourced within the studio from partners, from universities, from entrepreneurs, investors. They come through this rigorous validation process. And we actually use multi-agent systems and agentic AI to help augment our validation process.
Like validate the idea?
Yep.
Okay.
So, for example, I don't know, say we wanted to do this is a dumb idea, Uber for landscaping. Right? Say we want to do that, someone has to do diligence and be like, well, what is the market size? Who are the competitors? What are the follow-on investors? Because we can only fund this to some point.
And you actually employ agents to do these testings as well?
Yeah. So we built what we call Chandler. And Chandler is our team of AI agent analysts. And it's around 50 AI agents that all collaborate in a multi-agent system, and in around 30 minutes produce around 80% of what a human analyst would do in 2 weeks. So that was our dive into multi-agent systems, and we spent 9 months building out that system. So it gives us a huge leg up when we validate, because if you have an idea, instead of us having a team of 10 human analysts, we just go to Chandler and we fill out, it takes around 20 minutes to fill out a form that essentially has some details about the idea.
Almost a query for Chandler.
And then Chandler goes and it runs the whole analysis. It scores everything on our investment rubric for us. And it's obviously, a lot faster, right? So in 30 minutes, we get back 80% of 2 weeks of work. And it's obviously a lot cheaper than employing a team of 5 to 10 human analysts. And the coolest thing about it is the underlying technology we had to build in order to make Chandler, that orchestrator of agents, we're actually reusing in every single startup that we launch. So we've actually made that kind of high-level orchestrator our own library that we call Magic J. And Magic J is under the hood of all the new codes that we spin out, and it gives literally a 9-month head start. So it's super easy to verticalize that. I guess one of the things that I learned is when to delegate, and that is something where when I'm uniquely positioned, my kind of philosophy behind it is, if there's something that I'm uniquely positioned to solve, and I could add unique value to solving that problem, then I'll take it on my own. Otherwise, it's better to delegate. And then talking about what I was kind of alluding to later on that point was transitioning from a executive role, VP level role, to a co-founder role is different as well, because I used to have exposure to customers, exposure to partners, and be involved in strategic decisions. But now I'm making them and owning them. So it's more visibility, and it's also a bigger involved in more strategic decision making across the organization. Of course, being one of the co-founders, so it's definitely interesting. I guess the key lessons I learned about delegation, which I talked about. I also think, kind of a key thing that I learned is, how do you prioritize your time? So there's, at any given moment, there's a million things I could be doing for Better Future Labs. Some of them on the business side, some of them on the tech side, and it's okay, what needs to be done now, right? In some instances, it is helping my business partner prepare a investment deck for investors. Other instances, it's me locking myself away coding. And a lot of other instances, it varies in between. So I think just knowing when to prioritize my time and how to compartmentalize my time is really important skill set, and it's really important for especially technical founders, because I feel like technical founders end up wearing the most hats, because you're not only wearing a lead engineer, CTO hat, you're also wearing the business hat too. So you can't just be focusing all your time on the business. You have to be. And also, like, I genuinely enjoy building stuff. So I almost get like that craving to build. If I spend like a whole week working on business stuff, then the next week I have to be coding.
Yeah.
Well, what do you prefer more? Do you like the business part or the coding part more?
Personally, I really like building things. So I'm more on the coding, building side. I enjoy the business aspects to it, but I just, one of the cool things about Adventure Studio is we're always solving new problems, and that's what really gets me up in the morning. It's like we have all these really interesting problems, and developing solutions for them is just fascinating. So that's kind of where I really enjoy. I do enjoy some of the business aspects as well, but it's really like solving problems and building exciting things that solve those problems, and seeing users light up when they see the solution is cool.
I mean, I personally really resonate with the fact that you said, you could be doing a million things like at any time. Like, I think as engineers, and especially as computer science students, like we've talked about this, Zidanni and I have talked about this before, but it's like, yeah, it's the same thing for us too. Like we could be, working on a project. We could be like learning more about this. It's almost like those things like take like priority over your classwork sometimes, for better or for worse. But I think that's what makes engineering and computer science really interesting, to me at least, because you always have that sense of like, something in the back of your mind that it's like hard to, not do anything, because there's always something you could be doing, which makes it good and bad, because there's like always something to do. But then you're like, wait, there's always something to do. Like I can't no days off. So
I mean, that's a computer science major myself. I feel it's almost blasphemous to say this, but I personally prefer like the business side over the coding. Yeah, I just love like marketing and developing pitches, and like seeing the faces of people when I'm like pitching a product to them. I think it's like the most like beautiful thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's why he did the video for the hackathon we just did. Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about the Launchpad hackathon. We also just did like another hackathon where we won. Oh. Yeah, he did the video.
It was
stuff.
It's Quack Hacks. It was Steven's first ever like organized hackathon. They had like sponsors like AWS, Databricks, Datadog.
What happened to the hackathon? So like when I was at Steven's too long ago now, like I used to run the health tech hackathon and like venture hacks.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
they like you guys know like Frank and Hayden, right? Now there are other Launchpad ISM students, so we passed it to them, and I think they passed it to other. But yeah, it's that's awesome that you guys are doing that. I love hackathons;
Yeah.
a ton of fun. I used to love that stuff in college.
Well, yeah, we won best overall hack.
Congrats!
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And but I'm afraid that we don't know about like the health tech and the venture hacks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess it went off the radar like 6 years ago.
Yeah, I know Stevens has other like hackathons. There was even one recently, like and this is like to refer back to something you said, like how you were doing the unit testing software. Like we actually pitched a unit testing thing for a hackathon.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
We literally pitched something like that's why when you said it, I meant to say something, but I must have forgot. Like our idea was like the same thing. Like like TAs and CAs have like a difficult time, get like like outputting scores and stuff for homeworks, like rightfully so. So we were trying to make like a sort of like a software to make it simpler for them. Like
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean we got shut down, but like it's all good. But yeah, I was like, wait, we thought we had the same idea too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, testing is like a huge. So just zooming out to like the software development lifecycle, there used to be like way back when you used to have your engineers all the way in one silo. They would then pass the code to a testing team that was in their own silo. Then there's a whole deployment infrastructure team. Once it's deployed, it goes to another team that maintains it. What you're seeing now is with modern DevOps and DevSecOps and a lot of these other tools is engineers that are actually building the products are owning the whole life cycle. And you have like your SREs and your platform engineers and some of your DevOps engineers that are helping at like the tail end. But engineers are essentially responsible for tests now. In pretty much all modern software development organizations. Of course, you have your really old school ones, but engineers are expected to be writing tests for their code and testing their code. So with that new responsibility, you need tools that assist you with that. So that's kind of where I think unit testing tools came in, where I got the idea, and I guess where you guys kind of got the idea too, is like, there needs to be more tools all along the way. And it's been getting better. So there's a lot of, like, for example, GitHub Actions and Jenkins, great pipelines, to help deploy and test. But there needs to be these little tools that are injected along the way. And there's a lot of room, I think, to build in that space, especially with AI.
Yeah, and especially with agentic coding and stuff, because there's I guess like small errors that typically are patterns, like the same errors that agents make when they're coding. So yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Anyone who wants to make that, yeah, it's a good idea.
I actually did a funny experiment the other day. You guys might like this. So I'm a big fan of Cursor.
Us too.
Us too.
What I did was I have like a small, like, I love using Firebase for like a lot of just early day startup things, because it takes care of a lot of that administration for you. It's like, this is like 2-3 years ago. I built a little tool just for myself, because the Firebase console is not very good. Like, you can't, like, basic things. You can't, like, rename stuff. You can't, a bunch of little things. So I built my own tool to do that for me. And I was like, you know what? I like guide Cursor a lot. So like, I actually wrote an article a while back about, like, how do you guide Cursor to develop faster? Like, I'm heavily into guiding it. However, I was like, what happens if I just let Cursor go off the rails? So I held my breath, and I was like, I'm just gonna let Cursor do this. And it was adding a new feature. It's just a little side project, just adding a new feature where it was a grid that has different data in a Firebase storage bucket. I was like, let me just see what happens. It produced a 3,000 line React component. Yeah. I was like internally crying watching this, and it kept going, and like, that is so bad. It had duplicate code all over the place, and what it helped me really realize is, like, okay, the way I've been guiding Cursor is good, but if you're not an engineer and you're just letting Cursor do it, like what I was doing in that experiment, like, oh my god,
you just don't understand it. You just have to accept it, like, accept the 3,000 lines.
Give it the keys, you go.
Yeah,
let go.
Exactly. So like, it's something where, and then interesting, like, closing the loop on the experiment. So I was like, all right, what happens if I start guiding it on refactoring? So breaking all of this essentially junk into small reusable components with, like, best practices. It's fairly good, actually, at 1 to 2 shotting small refactors. If you say, like, hey, I think this could be broken out into its own component, let's do that, import it in. So I think, like, agentic coding is amazing. Like, it helps me be so much more productive. But I think a lot of engineers are going to get very rich fixing business people's agentic code.
That's such a great point.
Yeah, and we have Superbase, right, the Firebase alternative. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you could just, like, straight up just, like, rename storage buckets, like, on the spot right now. So.
Superbase is good. I like it, but Superbase's database is Postgres based.
Yeah,
it's not NoSQL.
I think you could change it though. Right?
I guess. I don't know, something also about, like, more kind of, I guess, like a traditional mindset of, like, Firebase is based on top of Google Cloud. There's certain reliability there,
okay.
Versus Superbase being a layer on top of a layer. So, like, right now, we're doing, like, for Better Future Labs, we're building a product in the private investigation space using AI to augment private investigations, and I can't talk too much about it because it's very early days, but being able to be based off of Google Cloud with its level of compliance and uptime and things like that, it's just saying the name Google Cloud to some of the potential partners and clients holds a lot more weight than if I say Superbase. The business people kind of get scared. But yeah, Superbase is a great product. It's something I would definitely use on, like, a smaller, less intense B2B with all of these compliances that I need to comply by.
So, throughout this entire, like, episode, we've been, like, there's this talk about, like, agents, multi-agent systems. So for those unfamiliar, can you explain what multi-agent systems are and why they matter for, in your words, through your LinkedIn, the workforce of the future?
Yeah, great question. So let's first start with what is an agent, right? So 99% of what you see on X that they're calling AI agents are really workflows. And that's totally fine, by the way. If there's an AI workflow that solves a real business problem and delivers real business value, all power to you, right? That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a lot of misconception about what an agent really is. So the way that I view an agent, and I think the way that other like researchers in the space define an agent, is essentially an agent is an entity that it might have access to a language model, might also have access to like a visual language model, right? A bunch of different types of models that it has access to. It has a communication style. So just like how we all have our own communication styles, an agent has its own communication style. It has jobs to be done. So for example, just like how a human analyst has jobs to be done in terms of if they need to analyze or if they need to create a financial model for this company, they have a job to be done of how to create that financial model. They have a communication method. So just like how you could communicate with your team over like Microsoft Teams or Slack, agents have a way to communicate with both humans and potentially other agents if you're going to get to the multi-agentic space. They also have tools. So just like how like a human analyst might be able to search on Google, they might have access to Excel. They might need to make a PowerPoint at the end. And this is, I think, the biggest distinction between an AI workflow and like an agentic system, regardless of multi-agent systems yet, we'll get there, but is a workflow. Think about a workflow almost like an assembly line. If you're building a car, you have like one guy or one robot that is like drilling in the bolts for the tires. And they have a tool that they could use, but it's not really up to them when they use the tool. It's like, all right, tires here, bolts are now here, drill the bolts in, pass the tire. When a agent is able to think about when it needs to use a tool. So for example, say we're tasking an agent with performing a research report on follow-on fundraising opportunities for this new company. It might do an initial search on Google, and then based off that initial search, it might also be like, hey, there's not enough information here on Google. Let me go search PitchBook or Crunchbase or another proprietary database. So it actually thinks about that, right? It's like, couldn't find it on Google, let me try to find it here. From there, it then might enter something in on PowerPoint and then realize, well, there's not enough data here for the end user to be happy. So I'm going to go make another search. And I'm going to search this different data source this time. So you can see where it's different. Then it's not just like, okay, I receive the tire, I screw in the bolt, I pass it here. It's, I search this, I put it in, this is enough. Here we go, we're good. Or, you know what, this is not enough, I need to go back and search more. And so that's like a single agent. A multi-agent system is when you take many of those agents and you provide them the means to interact and work together collaboratively. So an example of that could be a simple one. Say you want to make a blog for this podcast. You might have a writer agent that receives the transcript, and it might search on Google to see, well, what's factually correct. It might just intuitively know that certain things are factually correct, and it might start drafting out this blog post. And then once it feels comfortable, it might send it to an editor agent who then reviews this blog post and determines like, hey, this doesn't fit for our audience, or here's some things we need to change. And it might then communicate that. It might text it to this agent, essentially like text it. It has a communication bus. Message it to this agent that's the writer, and it would make some edits, and it would incorporate that feedback, and they would go back and forth discussing and collaborating, just like how a human writer and editor would. And then say like consensus is met between the writer and editor, however you program in the consensus mechanism, which there's a lot of ways to do it. And then from there, once consensus is met, it might just be automatically published. Like that's, I guess, the difference, if that makes sense.
That really changed my perspective on agentic systems, because are you familiar with the Crew AI framework?
Yep.
Is that an AI workflow or an agentic agentic system? Because based on your definition, now I see it as just an AI workflow.
Crew AI can do some agents. Mostly it's used for workflows.
Okay.
So I really like AutoGen and AG2. So I was actually a maintainer of AG2 for a while. that's the one that I prefer and that we use at Better Future Labs. Yeah, I think like kind of what I was saying, a lot of people are calling workflows agents, and it kind of discounts, the what are actually real agents. So real agents, I think, are much different. And by the way, though, right, like nothing is wrong with workflows, because if a workflow solves a real world problem, that's great, and workflows can solve a lot of real world problems. Agents are just different.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that puts it in perspective for me too. Like, I guess a good example of that maybe could be like, maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but like maybe like a fine-tuned model compared to an agent. Like a fine-tuned model, you can give it like a bunch of like source material, like PDFs and stuff like that, and you might think, oh, this is like Agentic, like this can like go through all these like things by itself, but like you have to like tell it what to do to begin with. Whereas like an agent, like cursor's like, oh wait, this didn't work, let me try this now, like completely on its own. So
yeah, like I guess like a fine-tuned model is the way that I'd look at a fine-tuned model. This is like a super zoomed out approach, is just like you're adding more context to a brain.
Yeah.
Right? And you might actually incorporate a fine-tuned model in an agent, right? So like using your example,
like the writer or the editor, like you said.
Yeah, so you might fine-tune the writer to have all of this additional context, to have a personality and a writing style that is more in tune with what you expect, the blog posts to be like. And you might incorporate that into an agent, so that's totally fine. I view it almost as like complementary, right? And when you add all of these interesting techniques, right? So when you add like fine-tuning, RAG, zero-shot tool use, like all these things, it actually forms a really interesting layer into an agentic system and then a multi-agent system, which forms actually some really good proprietary IP to go build a company off of. So like that's actually exactly what what we do at Better Future Labs is. That's like day in and day out is building those types of systems and applying them to all of these interesting, at least I think are interesting industry problems.
I guess straying away from the tech speak.
Yeah.
What is one thing, or could be two or three or multiple? What do you wish you knew before starting your first venture or startup?
That's a good question. So, I think a couple things. I think one thing is it's a rough thing, but I think it's something important for people to realize is like it's better to think in terms of trade-offs than in terms of balance. So one of the only infinite resources, or one of the only finite resources rather, is your time. And there's only so many ways you could spend your time. And going back to what we were discussing around like prioritization and allocation, everything is a trade-off, right? So like if I'm looking for, say, balancing business and tech on a daily basis, that's really not going to happen. What instead is going to happen is by focusing on building this piece of tech, I'm not able to focus on this piece of the business. And there's a trade-off associated with that. And as, a co-founder, I have to be comfortable with that trade-off. So is the gain that I'm gaining from investing my time in working on the tech stuff worth the opportunity or realized cost of not working on the business stuff, and vice versa? And I think that analogy actually translates broader into just life in general, to be honest, is everything is a trade-off. Like, should I play Xbox, for this hour, or should I instead like work on building this feature? Like what hour is going to give me the most leverage? So I think like the sooner people realize that is that I think viewing in terms of balance is not the right approach. I think viewing in terms of like what am I gaining versus what am I losing by spending my time in this way, or just more generally investing in this way or other things. I think that's a really valuable lesson to be learned super early on. And I think I learned it early on enough where I was able to get a lot of leverage and value out of realizing that. But I think that realization is key.
Yeah. To that point, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention this earlier, but I have to like dip out because I have an RA like orientation meeting.
All good.
at 3, so I'm really sorry about that. But
4.
oh yeah, at 4, yeah. And but actually, that what you just said completely resonates with me. I've actually like sort of struggled with that. Like this semester in particular, Zidanni and I are working on a lot of like really cool things together.
Yeah.
I'm involved with like a few organizations on campus and obviously schoolwork. So what advice would you give to engineers and computer science students trying to balance all these different things? 1, schoolwork. 2, external projects and stuff like that. And 3, I guess extracurriculars like leadership and things like that. Because I think it's very delicate. So yeah.
I'm going back to it. I wouldn't balance it. I would analyze it. So what I would say is, I would reverse engineer. What do I want to achieve? So when you graduate, or when you must have some sort of goal, right? Of like, this is what I want to get out of my education experience at Stevens. That's a broad goal, right? You might then reverse engineer that a little bit into some more smaller, more short-term achievable goals. And then I would see, how does each one of these activities that you could perform contribute or degrade from that goal? So, for example, say you have the opportunity to be a contributor on a really popular, say your ultimate end goal is you want to get a great job as a AI software engineer, right? And then say you have an opportunity to be a contributor for an up-and-coming AI software project that's open source. And you have another opportunity to be, I don't know, like some sort of campus leadership position. It's like, okay, well, which one, I could only spend 3 hours this week. Which one helps me achieve that end goal better? Is it this campus leadership position, or is it doing this, really exciting contribution to this, open source project? And that's up for, only you could make that decision, right? And that's kind of how I would do it. Is I would reverse engineer backwards. If this is where I want to be, see all of the activities that you could perform, and then map out how do you spend your time. That'd be my recommendation. Is like it's very personalized, so you have to. It's not like I can't give like a generic answer like only build projects.
It does a lot of reflection because maybe if your goal is to if you're an engineer, go to grad school, get your PhD, it should obviously be grades. So
exactly right. Yeah. So like that's the thing where it's hard to give, but I think that's the approach though, right? Is like if that's your goal, is like I want to get a PhD at a top tier research university, and eventually in that PhD, I want to be published in only the best ACM publications. Well, you could then reverse back into seeing, okay, well, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn in order to get into that program, get those publications, versus getting a job in industry at a big company versus getting a job at a startup. It's all... But that would be my approach, if that makes sense.
That's a great answer. And thank you so much again. I'm sorry. I have
yeah, no worries. Good meeting you.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Yeah, great meeting you too.
All right. So you spoke at GitHub Universe about empowering developers. What's one cultural or process change that made the biggest difference in your teams?
That's a great question. I think a big process change was adopting true CI/CD.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, what is that?
Yeah, let's dive into that. So CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment. And we were, when I was first starting out at Caregility, we were more of like an old school style where we'd have some like pipelines that did like some basic things, but we didn't have full, I push my code and somehow it magically appears in my development environment. We didn't have that level of automation. And what we had to do was, because it was in telehealth, we had to have an annual security audit. Very important because, telehealth security is huge, right? You can't have, like you probably heard of like the Zoom hijacking that was happening like those years ago. Like in telehealth, that could not happen. Like bottom line, that's just not possible to happen. So we had an annual security audit that we would do, a third party, where we literally have to package our code up in zip files and send it to these people. So there's a lot of things there where I was just analyzing. I was like, okay, well, how can automation help? And what we ended up adopting was what I think is like a true CI/CD organization in a constrained environment, because telehealth and healthcare is a pretty constrained environment from regulatory, security, testing perspective. So we migrated to GitHub Enterprise, which was a big migration. We had over 120 repositories we had to migrate over, which is a lot of code. We had to migrate over 50 developers, and we adopted GitHub Actions to be our CI/CD pipeline. And in that GitHub Actions, we had some checks. So first check was, let's run all of your unit tests. All your unit tests have been, were running that you were writing. Another check was like linting, making sure there's no linter errors. Even though all the everyone pretty much runs linters in their IDE or text editor, it's good to just have a concrete linter check. So we established like linter standards for the whole company or for the whole organization. And then we incorporated security testing in our pipeline. And this was huge because instead of every year doing a security audit, we could have our code checked in real time for security vulnerabilities. So we used GitHub they have their GitHub Advanced Security, which includes Dependabot, which is open source, by the way. Anyone can use that, which is essentially it identifies dependency vulnerabilities. So say you're importing in some open source package that you're using. You want to make sure that package is clean. Or if there's vulnerabilities in that package that could be exploited, you at least know what they are so you can mitigate that risk. It identified all of those for you, which is great. Then it actually scanned the code on each push for potential vulnerabilities. And by incorporating that, we were able to be much more efficient in our development process.
So you're basically replacing the annual or the monthly auditing just by integrating that audit into your pipeline.
Yeah, so like imagine instead of doing an audit every single year, you're essentially doing a mini audit every single time you push code. And a continuous audit, because this tool not only would scan vulnerabilities in your PR, it would also repeatedly scan your whole code base and highlight things when they occur. So now you don't have to wait a year in order to identify something and fix it. And by the way, that's very inefficient because all of these things build up over a year, and the next thing you know, you have all these vulnerabilities that you never even knew about and that you have to obviously fix pretty urgently.
Yeah, definitely.
When with true like CI/CD and an SDLC, software development lifecycle that incorporates these types of tools, you're knowing in real time. And I am a big fan of let's push one feature at a time. Let's push one PR at a time rather than push these big, heavy, bulky releases. And being able to do all of that automated checks saves a huge amount of time. So I think that's kind of mainly what I spoke at GitHub about, was our experience adopting GitHub Advanced Security and how that impacted my team at the time. And it's tools that I still use to this day at Better Future Labs. So we're heavy users of as much automation as we can. We even use an open source PaaS, platform as a service. So instead of Heroku, we actually use like some open source ones, which I contributed a couple open source contributions to, that allows us to run Heroku on essentially like a Heroku on our own servers and our own infrastructure, and it handles all the load balancing and things like that. So, having your deployment stuff automated and all of those checks to go to production automated is, I think, really key, and it empowers developers to own a lot more of the life cycle.
So your approach to CI/CD is just put everything on the pipeline. Don't wait every time interval, every unspecified time interval to just make checks. And if you encounter an error, there's going to be so much backtracking because errors, it compounds. You make an error like a few months ago, something really big, especially when you're working in production. Yeah,
I think each PR should be ideally analyzed on its own individual basis. A PR should be small enough where it's not this massive change you're introducing, but it should be large enough where it's delivering something useful to the code base.
So like a feature, like a small feature.
Yeah, it could be like a small feature. It could be a component of a feature, right? So for example, I don't know, say you need to add like an API endpoint. Instead of adding, or say you need to add like 5 API endpoints, maybe you just add one at a time, right? But even then, depending on how complex the logic is behind that API endpoint, maybe you add the logic in one PR, and then you add, the networking and stuff like that, and another PR. So it really just depends. But the kind of the way I describe it is like what I was saying before, is like it should be small enough where it's adding value to the code base, but it shouldn't be so big where it can't be it's pushing you can't push like a huge change to a code base. It should be one at a time.
And I'm also aware of there's like naming conventions for commits and pushes. When you're adding, let's say you're just adding like a component, it would be feature / add navbar or something. Is that something that you do, like you keep in track, like at Better Future Labs? Like, do you keep like naming conventions in your pipelines and your pushes like very organized?
Great question. So I think it depends on the size of your team, and it depends on. So for example, when I had when I had a large team at Careagility, we had a lot of standards to make sure that code quality was consistent. With a much smaller team, I think it's better to be a little bit more lax with those standards because you can move faster.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of struck a good balance. The naming conventions, I don't think they're a huge deal for small teams. For larger teams, there's a lot of value in having naming conventions because it's easy to search things up. So that's kind of what I respond to that is we Better Future Labs, we have naming conventions for certain things. So for example, like API endpoints, routes, variables, classes, methods, components, like that's pretty strict. But commit tags, not really. I don't think there's enough value there at our current size to have that. So that's kind of, I think it's a balance, and it depends on who's working on what and things like that, if that makes sense.
Okay, so last question.
Yeah.
You recently testified before New Jersey legislature on the topic of energy and AI.
Yeah.
So can you bring us through why you were there and what you are hoping to accomplish?
Great question. That's a really good question. So a lot of things around that is there's a big concern from the AI research community around overburdening AI regulation. You could see in Europe there's a lot of really overburdening AI regulation. In the U.S., there was there's one bill proposed out of California that would have completely changed the landscape of AI, not only in California but across the U.S. for the negative. So there's a lot of states pushing really aggressive AI regulation that's just not. It just comes out of nowhere. Like it's like, where do they, where do they get these numbers? Like for example, there was like an executive order from the previous administration, 2022 or 2023, that essentially regulated math. It was like, hey, if you perform more than 10 to the 26 floating point operations per second, here's your laundry list of regulations you have to abide by. But if you don't,
crazy.
Then, so it's like, you're literally it's like if you perform this many math problems per second, you have to abide by this, but not abide by this. So it's weird, and a lot of states are pushing stuff, and New Jersey is, frankly, really on the back foot of AI advancement. Like across the river in New York, there's a lot of amazing AI research, a lot of amazing AI startups. In New Jersey, not so much, right? Especially on like the AI research and AI software side. Like we, of course, there's like, just for example, for us being like a AI startup in New Jersey working on like agentic AI research, there's not many other people in our field working at the depth that we are in New Jersey. and by the way, if anyone listening is, like we started Better Future Labs, like we started like an event series about AI, that we're actually hosting one at Stevens, because we're like, there's no one else doing this stuff. We want to meet people that are also doing stuff at the depth that we are. Maybe if we host an event, some of these people will show up, and we haven't really seen so like we're there's not much going on yet, but there's a lot of potential in, so what I kind of wanted to testify, and what I was talking about in New Jersey is like, all right, the way you take down an elephant is bite by bite.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about mainly energy consumption and data centers being constructed here. Tons of data centers are being built in the Midwest, where there's cheap energy and cheap land. And by the way, the energy is like clean energy. Like a lot of it's like hydroelectric. And like you saw Microsoft bought like 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
So when you hear about like this company bought 100,000 GPUs, it's typically going there. Mm-hmm. And those are your training data centers. And training data centers, it's different than, say, your traditional web application data center. So like, as you probably know, there's advantages or perceived advantages of having locally cached content to your users,
mm-hmm.
right? Like a content delivery network, you have like locally cached content in proximity to your users, where you have a faster pipe. There's a perceived advantage of having that there.
Mm-hmm.
With training, it completely blows that out of the water, because you just need to have enough network to pass your training data and your rates to the servers in the data center. You need to be able to run your methodology, your application there, and then then your output is your weighted model.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get out. So you really don't need too much, interconnected bandwidth, right? And you don't need like all this throughput.
Yeah.
When with traditional web application data centers, you do. So New Jersey is a net importer of energy. So what that means is we can't produce the energy the state needs within the state. We need to go to other states to get energy to power our state.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have enough energy produced here to even hold our current needs, let alone the exponentially scaling needs with AI and what AI data centers require. Land is also expensive here. But New Jersey wants to have like AI data centers here, which is tough given all of those constraints, right?
Yeah.
So my kind of point in that testimony was, since we are on the back foot, what I think the best way for New Jersey to get an advantage is what I was talking about, like how you take down an elephant is bite by bite,
mm-hmm.
is having inference data centers here. So inference is you have your AI model and you're essentially hosting it for users to consume it.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually more similar to like a traditional web application data center from the networking and location proximity advantages. Obviously, it still needs a lot of power and things like that. But my view is that if New Jersey wanted to have data centers here, that's where you start. That's your starting point. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's, what the senators got out of it is like, if we want to start actually doing some cool AI things in New Jersey, on a grander scale than just like startups like us,
mm-hmm.
That let's start with doing very targeted, very targeted applications and building those out. And that's one where inference data centers, we're still on the back foot on, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the best shot of New Jersey competing in the data center market, which it looks like the state wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of what I was saying is like, look, if you're going to try to compete, this is the one niche where I think you have a chance. And if you go after everything, you're going to fail, probably.
Does it like benefit the AI startups in New Jersey in any way if the data centers, like the inference data centers, are in New Jersey as opposed to the Midwest? Or is this push just for just New Jersey AI data centers only?
So, good question. I guess the first question about like, does it benefit New Jersey-based startups?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough thing to definitively answer. Like, yeah, there is some tangential benefit, of, having, I guess, like, a good community of AI, in New Jersey. There's definitely a benefit from that. But in terms of just pure, when I'm looking at, who do we go with for Better Future Labs, really it's more about cost, speed. So, like, for example, I really like using a GROQ, Grok. They have their own LPU chips that are able to perform inference super fast. Like lightning, it's crazy actually, like lightning fast. I'm gonna go with Grok, pretty much wherever they are. Because their service and the way that they're hosting these models provides so much value to us. If they were in New Jersey, great. If they're not in New Jersey, so it's a tough thing. I think there's benefits to the state of having a data center like that here, though. So as a resident, I'm a little bit biased that way, but from a pure business perspective, I really care about more what infrastructure are you running, how fast can you get that data to me for inference, as well as what models are you able to run and how much control do I have over those models. So it's like an interesting dynamic, On one hand, as a resident, I want to see New Jersey succeed. On the other hand, from a business perspective, kind of is what it is.
That's. I think it's like really cool that you're doing this, that you're bringing these issues up to New Jersey legislature. I've been to your last AI talk.
Oh, cool.
And I think I remember you and Aaron also went to New Jersey legislature before. I think it was about like startup funding. I think it was like governments like funding startups or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I think Aaron definitely, he does that stuff. My co-founder does that stuff all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? Thank you so much for this conversation. And we'll see you at the next episode of Hello, Emilio, Zidanni, and World.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Cool.